Hello, my fellow Extraordinary Americans. I'm Cosmos Dar, and this is Extraordinary America. What is Extraordinary America about? You see, American identity is about freedom, the opportunity for a better life, and the pursuit of happiness. Welcome to Extraordinary America. For today's guest, we have Brian Herriot. Brian is an author, speaker, financial advisor, and entrepreneurship coach. He has founded several businesses, including Herriot Financial, where he empowers budding entrepreneurs to find time freedom and live extraordinary lives. His frameworks for personal growth and financial success support his mission of helping others work on what they want, when they want, and for as long as they want. With a master's degree in finance, investment, and banking from the University of Wisconsin, and a rich background as a management consultant at Accenture and Point B, Brian established his own consulting firm 7 years ago. In 2023, after unlocking the formula for time freedom, he took a 6-month sabbatical, which inspired his passion for teaching others interested in living the same rich, free, full life full of choice, flexibility, and ease. Brian now spends months at a time away from work. He and his family enjoy summers at their lakeside cabin in northern Wisconsin. He has completed 2 bike rides across the state of Iowa, and a baby step towards his goal to someday ride across the entire country. He's an extraordinary American, and I'm glad to have him on the show. Brian, are you there?
I am. Thanks for having me.
Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to come on this podcast. Can you tell me and the audience a little bit more about yourself, your background, and how you got started?
Definitely. I am a financial advisor for entrepreneurs, and I got interested into this business about 3 years ago when I had my own personal experience of time freedom, which I'm sure we'll talk a lot about, and started sharing my story with others who became quite interested in this concept of a free and flexible lifestyle where you're working when you want to work, with whom you want to work, and for how long you want to work, and balancing that against some money and investments that they've saved up until that point. And so I began initially just doing some financial coaching, and then that's transferred into full-fledged financial advising and investment management, and also entrepreneurial coaching specific to aligning our businesses with our lifestyle. So kind of changing the format and the structure of the work we do, the teams that we manage, so that our businesses don't control us anymore, but that we're actually at the helm and working when we choose to.
So, Brian, what was the catalyst that got you to help others regarding getting time and financial freedom? Because I know you started many businesses, but at some point you were like, I want to help others achieve the same as well. So, what was that catalyst or turning point where you realized this is what you wanted to do?
I had a series of misses. So let me put it this way. I was on the early financial freedom path. Since I was young, I've always wanted to save a lot of money and retire early. And so I tried different paths. I tried just investing early. I fully maxed my 401k out from the moment I got my first job at 21 years old. But as I learned, even though compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, it still does take time, right? That's why they have you invest early, is because the biggest numbers happen much, much later. And so I just found that to be particularly slow. So then I tried the FIRE process, the Financial Independence Retire Early, where you cut way back on your spending. And I did that. But then I had a kid, and then I moved to California. And before you know it, you need to spend money to live your life, unfortunately, or fortunately. So that method didn't work either. Then I tried to strike it rich by starting a business. And I do have 3 businesses that I own right now, but none of them are knock it out of the park, venture capital backed unicorns that are going to make me independently wealthy. So after struggle, quote unquote, I haven't struggled, but after trying to reach this early financial freedom, I was kind of disheartened one day in 2020. This is also after the COVID crash killed some of my investment portfolio. I kind of confided in my wife, hey, this early financial freedom thing probably isn't going to happen for another 20 years. I was 45 at the time. And so that was 65. And it was the exact opposite of what I was trying to do for my entire life, is get that freedom early. When she wasn't disappointed or anything like that. She said to me instead, what would you actually do if you retired early? And I didn't really have a good answer because I like working. And so I said, well, I'd probably just do the same, but maybe a little bit less of it. And that's when she said to me, so you're really not retiring? And I'm like, and it seems so obvious now, but it kind of like a wake up call for me, which was, what am I pushing so hard for so that I could become, 100% financially free when I'll probably just go back and do some part-time work anyway. So that moment really flipped my thinking. And I started to think, well, if I'm going to do this kind of stuff anyway, when can I start doing it, like, say, 9 months out of the year and take my summers off? And it wasn't 20 years, it was 3 years. So if I, worked and saved for another 3 years, that would have put us to 2023. I could earn enough in 9 months and kind of leverage the savings and investment that I had to kind of manage the inconsistent income. I could take 3 months off, and I wasn't going to spend down all my money because I was still working. In the meanwhile, in the background, the money's still growing so that I can eventually become financially free. But I could achieve this time freedom so much sooner. And so in June of 2023, that was the first month that I took off on this sabbatical. And sure enough, I didn't know how long I would be off at the time, but 3, 4 months in, 5 months in, as I kind of expected, I was ready to get back and do some work again. And so I did. And now we've kind of transitioned into this lifestyle where we do work during the school year, basically. And then in California, where I live, and then we pack up the minivan and drive to Wisconsin, and we water ski and fish and eat ice cream and go to the Independence Day parade during the summer. And I still do creative work and some kind of the fun stuff, like our conversation here. But but I'm here at our cabin and enjoying the summer.
Right, that is amazing, and a lot of people want to live like that lifestyle. But just for the sake of the audience, a lot of people talk about financial freedom, but not enough people talk about time freedom. But ultimately, time freedom is like you can get your finances back, but you can't get your time back. So, for the sake of the audience, like, what does time freedom mean to you versus financial freedom?
Financial freedom to me means absolute, absolute, it's absolute total freedom, which means that obviously your savings and investments, you can live off of 4% per year to run, so that they never run out, and you never have to do anything again. The problem is to get to that number, that savings mountain. It can take a long time unless you strike it rich, luckily, right? What I realized is I didn't want absolute freedom. I wanted meaningful freedom. So that doesn't mean I'm 100% solely, I don't have to do any work ever again. It doesn't mean that at all. I definitely have to work, but I have to work in the way that I want to work, whatever that is for me and whatever it is for anybody. So that could be 3 months off in the summer, like me, or it could be 30-hour weeks year round, or it could be full time, but 3 of the months in Europe and 3 of the months in South America and 6 months in the States. It's whatever is important to you. But it's taking that kind of financial freedom is totally focused on the savings and investments. Time freedom focuses on that, but also adds in the really flexible work, right? So it's kind of it adds that other feature. And I mean, how I came about it too is I've been looking for somebody to help me for years when I was younger, who could give me a full comprehensive look at my money, right? And you could either find an investment manager or a financial planner, and they would look at what you have in stocks and bonds. And then the insurance person would do the insurance. And then if you wanted to learn about how to start a business, then you went to an entrepreneurial consultant. But nobody was like looking at the whole thing. And so that was a real kind of mindset shift for me, where I'm like, I need them all to work together. And so that's what I provide in my company, Herriot Financial, is that we can look at all those things. And I actually have a calculator that's free, and it's timefreedomcalculator.com. Anybody can use it. And you can go out there, and it's part retirement calculator, but it also allows you to add in this flexible work after that kind of freedom date. And so you can project out, through to the end of your life to make sure you don't run out of money, but you can kind of see when you can start working half time or 3/4 time or whatever it happens to be. But yeah, so in short, I mean, time freedom it's a path in life that has meaningful freedom associated with it, but not absolute freedom. And just one other thing, sometimes when people hear time freedom, they think work-life balance, and it's definitely not that either, because my experience with work-life balance is it doesn't really work. And it's kind of narrowly focused, right? Work-life balance is focused on a day and a week. And how do you take off for 3 hours in the middle of the day and then make it up overnight?
Mm-hmm.
And time freedom is like, how do you spend your months and your years and your decades, right? So it's broader, much broader, and much more achievable more quickly than financial freedom.
So Brian, I know that you mentioned there's something called like a time freedom formula. So like, can you tell for the sake of the audience what is a time freedom formula and how would they go about using it if they want to like do it?
Yeah. So the time freedom formula is the key framework in my book, and it is an expansion of the financial freedom formula. So financial freedom is, of course, you have lifestyle expenses that you need to support, and you take 4% of the money that you've saved, and you need those to equal out, right? So that you can cover them in a year. The time freedom formula adds the flexible work. So the time freedom formula is 3 components: lifestyle expenses in a year, plus the investment income in a year, or excuse me, lifestyle equals the investment income plus the flexible work. So it's just adding, like I mentioned, kind of conceptually, it's adding in that work. And so if you look at 1 year in your life, you live on 100, just to keep the number simple, $100,000, right? And you have some investment income equal to, I don't know, maybe you've saved $500,000, right? So 4% of that is 20,000. And so 100,000 equals 20,000 plus you need $80,000 of flexible work that year to kind of come up with this, to make your formula balance. And then if you can figure out that across the year, that's step one, right? But then that's a lot for me to say, well, see, there you go. Now you can be time free. People will be like, wait a second, how does this look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What the calculator does is it kind of translates that 1 year view out forever, and it accounts for growth of investments and growth in income, and if you have to pay for college for your kid out in the future, that's what gives people the ultimate confidence. And then once you have that underlying financial confidence on how all these pieces of your finances fit together, savings, investments, work, expenses, once that all fits, then you can say, all right, now I want to do this flexible work. How do I do the flexible work? Because that's the next question, is like, now that I know that the money will work, how do I actually make the actual work work?
So Brian, like what you're doing is so relevant because a lot of people like they go about their finances, but they don't actually like compartmentalize it and divide into ways that can actually bring them time freedom in the long term. Like it does matter. Like if you have discipline and then you budget stuff over a long period of time, it does add up. But one question I did want to ask you is like like in today's world, there's a lot of inflation. Like especially like in 2022, like there was inflation, and like the banks have been printing like a lot of money. So like for the sake of the audience, like how would we go about a lot of people would say that if you keep money in a savings account, it's going to the purchasing power will be reduced. So from your perspective, how would you counter something like that?
Yeah. So just a quick comment about inflation. Yes, like I think the Fed targets 2%. Traditionally, it's been 3%. It could go up probably long term even to 4%. So the calculator is where the inflation is factored in. So there's a key inflation number you put in the calculator, and then you inflate your expenses in your incomes and things along those lines. But to the point about savings, this is actually an interesting question because I have advice that I think is a little bit different from most people. I'm a huge believer in a big savings account. So usually I advise between 10 and 30% of, like, if you want to live with time freedom, that you have between 10 and 30% of your savings in, or excuse me, of your portfolio in savings, or between 6 months and 2 years. So if you do that math, you can kind of feel like, you can see from a percentage standpoint, and you also can see like, oh, if I couldn't find work for 2 years, could I last, before I'd have to pull money out. Now, I love cash and I love cash savings, but people will typically say, like what you had kind of alluded to in your question, if you have money in cash, then it's not invested and it's not going to be able to earn the interest and it's not going to keep up with inflation.
Mhm.
Totally valid. However, I think there are other uses of cash that people aren't thinking about. One is, I think cash is defensive because it allows you to survive for up to 2 years, if you can't find work or if your investments are down or anything like that. So that's hugely defensive, but it's also you can take a very offensive, not offensive like in a bad way, but like on offense with cash, where let's say that, you have $100,000 of cash in your overall account, and you're like, oh man, that feels like too much, because it will feel that way, right? But what if an opportunity comes along to start a business and you need $40,000, and and you're confident in it, and you can turn that 40,000 into 80,000 by the end of the year. Well, that cash all of a sudden earned you 100%, and it's just a different, like, I think people, again, it's because we keep those things separate. We think of cash only in the investing bucket, but if you think about it and you bring it over and use it in your entrepreneurship bucket, oh my God, that's a huge thing. And then if you didn't have that cash, or you had to sell your investments at a loss to make that investment in your business, well, that's just not going to work out well. So yeah, so I have a whole chapter dedicated to cash in my book. That's not out yet, but is coming out next year, to help people kind of figure out what the appropriate cash allocation should be in their account. Because you're going to keep up with inflation by coming up with a great business that you can do that can make a lot of money that you don't have to spend all of your time in. That's where I think the answer is, personally.
No, I mean, what you're saying is so relevant because, like, a lot of people are like, they think about that and they're like, oh, purchasing power is being eaten away and everything. What do we do? But like, one of the things that I've noticed in our society is like, there's the keeping up with the Jones mentality, right? Where like even though like, and it affects their financial decisions, like, even though like they don't have the money to buy something, like they'll buy the car or they'll take a mortgage and everything like that, and then they'll get into debt. So, from your perspective, for somebody that has that mentality, how would they go from there into like a more productive type of thing where they're saving income and then actually getting to a place where they can attain freedom?
Yeah, great question. So the three components of the financial freedom formula, excuse me, the time freedom formula, are lifestyle expenses, investment income, and flexible work. Lifestyle expenses is that first one, right? And obviously, the lower you can move it, the sooner you can get to time freedom. And so, chapter 7 in the book is looking at that. So it's almost like I've prepped you ahead of time here to ask me these questions, but this is great. And my thinking on how to approach how you spend is a concept that I actually call the no budget budget. And so what I mean by that is, I don't know about you, but budgets never work for me. I mean, it usually take like, I am like, oh my God, I'm spending too much. Then I pick some arbitrary numbers and I set it and I track it for 3 months. And then I forget about it. And then I realize that I'm overspending again. And I'm like, oh my God, I better go do that again. And so like, it's just this constant feeling of like, I'm not doing well enough. So what I now do, the last one I did was in early 2024. So I don't do it every year or anything, but what I do is I do the no budget budget, where I pull all my expenses together and I categorize them, by the group, the 10 sets of, the 10 groups, the car and the home and all the traditional things. And then I sort by the biggest numbers. So the biggest category or the biggest numbers within the category. And I say, is this spending in line with my values? Right. So maybe I spend a whole bunch on personal fitness trainers, but I value that because it makes me a healthy person. I'm going to keep spending that. But if I spend a whole bunch of money on Instacart because during COVID I got lazy, but now I could actually have my grocery bill by going to Trader Joe's, I'm going to do it. Right. And all of a sudden I just saved $5,000 right there, each year. If you go through and you kind of find like those big numbers and you kind of say, is this aligned with me? You can usually cut out like 20% of your spending. And then instead of like coming up with some arbitrary budget, what you come up with is like some rules of thumb. And so like the one that I use to this day, which I it's hugely important to me, is I used to just get gas anywhere whenever I needed it. But now I only get it at the grocery gas lot because that's where it's the cheapest. I know it's always, I've checked a couple times, it's always the cheapest. So now I don't have to like go searching around. I just always go get gas there. And you can carve money off that way. So if you take a look at your budget, you get rid of the things that aren't aligned with your values, and then you set behavior change around some of the key things to make sure that it doesn't start to creep back up. You can all of a sudden, find yourself with all of this, additional money, which then can go into savings or investing, like you suggested, without feeling bad because you're not meeting a budget. It's just that you're being thoughtful. You're being thoughtful about your money. I think that's a huge thing, being thoughtful about your money and aligning it to what you value and kind of trying to change your behaviors to then align with those values.
I mean, Brian, what you're suggesting is so applicable, but it requires a lot of discipline. And I would tell my audience that you have to be disciplined with your budget, and like you have to track in order to like get to the point. And so that it might actually require like habit changes to achieve that goal.
True. I think though, if you pull your credit card statements for 2 years, I do it over 2 years. You pull your credit card statements for 2 years, you pull your bank account statements for 2 years, and you pull your Venmo and your PayPal's for 2 years, and then any other like large expenses that don't flow through those accounts, like health insurance premiums or something like that. If you pull all those into a single spreadsheet, you're going to have to spend some time cranking through it. Absolutely, totally agree with you. But you're doing it one time, so it might take you a Saturday. Think of it like doing your taxes. You're going to have to spend the time on it once a year. But if you just do it and then you kind of identify those runaway costs that you're like, oh my God, I didn't even know I still spent money on 2 gym memberships. I don't even go there anymore. Like then you got to, you do those things once and then you're done. You don't have to think about it again then until you're like, oh boy, my spending is really crept back up again.
So Brian, like as a like connected to this, right? So like for people listening to this, a lot of people, they want to get to the part of time and financial freedom, but they have a lot of debt in different areas that they've accumulated over the years: credit card debt, mortgage, just like student debt, and all these different kinds, right? And but they want to but they're doing a job and they want to like get rid of the debt and then start doing that. How would you advise them to go about the process of like getting rid of debt and then attaining freedom?
Yeah, debt is like the opposite of freedom.
It's
Right. And
bonded,
so,
actually.
right. But unfortunately, a lot of us have it. And a lot of us have it because, you know, student debt was pushed on us and we didn't realize, the impact of it. Or I don't know if you were like me, but, when you go to college, then all of a sudden, all those people are pushing credit cards on you and you don't even know what you're doing yet. And so I feel like the first thing I advise people is don't feel bad about it, right? Like, or try not to feel bad about it. I don't want to tell you not to feel bad about it, but try not to feel bad about it. Like, it's just a situation that we find ourselves in. But what I also realize about debt is that it's really hard for people to think about time freedom when they have debt hanging over their head. Right.
Mhm.
And so when I first started this, I'll be like, all right, let's talk about your flexible work and your investment income, and we're going to map it out for freedom. And they're like, I can't even think about that because I've got, $20,000 in debt that I have to pay off. I'm like, okay, good point. We have to deal with that first. And before like, you can still use the calculator. What I tell them to do is just like, think ahead 2 years, like set all the numbers ahead 2 years, assuming you're starting out without the debt. And then you can get excited about it so that you can then return your focus to the single thing, which is really debt. And I'm talking, of course, the bad debt, the consumer debt and things like that, but also the good debt. Like any debt is a claim on future income. And so it is literally the opposite of freedom. So just A lot of people use good debt to accelerate wealth growth, which is good if that's your point. If that's your goal, I mean, mine, I'm not trying to be the wealthiest person. I'm trying to have the most freedom, right? And so I am much less likely to take on debt. I mean, I do have a mortgage on this cabin, and we have a mortgage on our home in California, but that's about it. So then anyway, back to your original question, what do you do? Well, it's your sole focus. Like seriously, like it's number, you're not saving and paying down debt. You just got to pay off all your debt. So step one, put it all on a 0% credit card if you can. Like you got to immediately roll it over to wherever it has the lowest interest rate. And then step number two is figure out all the different ways that you can find money to pay that off. And that includes asking for a raise, doing the no budget to cut, or trying to find money. In my book, I have like 20 different ways where you can just go find money. Maybe it's stopping your retirement savings temporarily to pay the stuff down. But they really, really like there's 50 different places that you can look to either increase your income or reduce your expenses to take all that difference of money and put it toward that darn debt, because the debt absolutely has to go. That's probably it's still a little high level, but that's probably the best answer I could give you at this point.
So I know you mentioned that like there's consumer debt and there's good debt, right? So when you're talking about good debt, are you talking about like debt which can be utilized to gain assets or just
Yeah.
some?
Yeah. So one example would be let's use that example I said where you had an opportunity to invest in a business. What did I say, for $20,000, whatever the number was?
Mhm.
If you have cash, in your portfolio, you can use cash to buy that opportunity and turn it into a business. Or if you didn't have cash, you could take out a loan, from a bank or from a friend or whatever. But you could take out a loan for that money to invest in that business to turn it into something. I would call that good debt, because it's money that you're putting toward an income producing asset. But a lot of people would say do it because you're able to build your business not using your money. That's a totally valid argument. It's just not one for time freedom, because I don't want to, like, what if it didn't work? Then I'm paying interest on like something worth, or I'm paying back a loan on something worth zero. That doesn't work for me. If I did the investment and it didn't work, that's okay. I don't have any less freedom because of it. I can just kind of move on and try again. But yeah, that's what I mean by that. And I would never advocate buying stocks on leveraged stocks, or any. I mean, there are cases like if you have a really low interest home mortgage, but you kind of have to have that. That makes total sense to me. But I just look at everyone though very carefully.
No, I mean, like, yeah, this is actually relevant because a lot of people, when they think of debt, they think it's a negative term, right? But like, consumer debt is negative, like where you're getting liabilities. But if you're using debt to, like, let's say, start a business which will produce income, then it becomes like an asset in a way because it's kind of like strategic. So I would want the audience to know the difference between good debt and bad debt for
And
that.
I have heard stories of people maxing out their credit cards to start a business that became massively successful. And you pay that off, and it's great. And it's a great story, and it's actually really great for them. It's just I'm more conservative in how I look at that stuff. And I wouldn't want to take the risk because of the possible. Here's a different way of thinking about it. I have time freedom right now. I don't want to lose it. So in a way, some people could say like you've won, right? Like you're in this situation. And so I think the way that you view um, the future is different. Like you still want to grow and do some great things in life, and I definitely do, but you're also very aware of risks that you're taking that could take it all away. And I feel like debt, good or bad, is certainly something that could take it all away.
No, I mean, totally,
Yeah.
Brian.
Yeah.
And and Brian, like, continuation to this, but on a national level, right? Like America's identity is about freedom. But when it comes to like time freedom and financial freedom, we notice that most people do not have that freedom. So do you think that there's like a hypocrisy right now between like our ideals of freedom and then the reality that the masses have to do when it comes to their finances and their time?
I think it's very unfortunate. I don't think people are at like to blame or at fault though. I think, there's a lot of um, forces working against us, you know, credit cards being pushed on us and, giant things of cereal at the grocery store. Like there's, like, I mean, it's capitalism and it's important and it's all good, but like it's hard, like we're, for example, we're trying to get our son to eat well, but boy, bad food is so easy and cheap, like, and it's found everywhere. Like, how does he keep getting this stuff? I don't know. Like we're doing our best, but it's like so hard to kind of turn it for the better. So I think some of that has to do with the way that people get indebted to, and it does take a lot of hard work to get out of it, but I think it's possible. Like it's so rewarding when I work with someone and you see them kind of like, I'm thinking of this one woman in particular, and she's like, you know what, it's time. Like I am totally committed. And she moved all the money, all the debt over to a low interest bearing credit card, and we figured out all these different ways. And it's going to take a year and a half, but in a year and a half, she's going to have figured it out and be out of that. And that, boy, when you get rid of your debt, that's the first feeling of freedom. Now maybe it's not like I can work 6 months of the year and be fine, but boy, you don't have that debt hanging over your head. That feels great. It feels really, really, really good. Yeah.
Right. I appreciate everything you're doing regarding this because what you're doing is something that should have been taught in the education system and in traditional education, like in universities and everything. But unfortunately, that's not taught. Like we're taught to be like workers, but we're not taught how to manage like basic finances. They don't
Right.
teach you that in school or like in university. So I think like something like what you're doing, it should be there like on a like a national level, in my opinion.
Thank you. And I so agree with you. And I've tried so hard. So I've been working on this book for already 18 months and it's still 9 months from coming out. And the reason it takes so long is because it actually takes a really long time to write a really good book. And one of the things about a good book is that it is clear and doable. And we're talking, I mean, some of these concepts can be complicated, and so to be able to explain them in a clear way that as many people as possible can understand them and act on them, that's on the author, right? That's on the author to make it that way. And I hope that I will have achieved that by the time that it is published April 2026, so that people can use it and improve themselves and not have to wait for retirement or unless they want to, that's fine too. But if people, so many people I talk to are like, boy, I'd love to be in control and have my freedom now, and I'm like, well, there's a way you can do it. You're still gonna have to work, but let's figure out how to have that really great work, that you wouldn't mind doing probably till you're 90. I mean, if the work was so good and it had just the good stuff, like the impact and the social connections, and you could get rid of all like the corporate politics and all the, I don't know, the infighting and like administrative stuff. Like if you could just carve out just the good stuff, why wouldn't you want to do it forever? Like it feels good like when you do just the good stuff. So I mean, it's not easy, but there's ways to figure out kind of how to do that.
But Brian, like I feel like now, like time and financial freedom, like knowing how to do that at an early age is really important because the old systems of security that we had, where you're
Mm.
in a job and for 40 years, and then they'll give you all the benefits, and then you can retire properly. Like that's no longer there. We live in a time of financial uncertainty where you can lose your job just like that, and the only sure shot, like permanent way of like security is you got to rely on like starting a business or investing right or having the right way of time and financial freedom because we do live like in a very different era than what was there in the 1950s.
Totally agree. I mean, and that's literally how I start my book. It's like people think it's too risky to start a business. I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe it's more risky to have everything tied to a single job that you could lose in a second. Yeah, I so agree with you. And there are lower risk ways to start a business. For example, you know, don't come up with a unique idea. That's my advice. Like, let's say you worked in, I don't know, you worked you worked in like marketing, for 15 years in a company. Well, what you should start is a marketing consultancy or, be a fractional marketing CMO for small businesses. That's what you should do. You shouldn't like be like, oh, I want to start a chip company where we only boil the chips in the best thing. Like you don't know anything about that. Like the chances of that succeeding are super low. I think people, because that's the story that, we get told about entrepreneurship is you have this cool new idea and then you become a billionaire. No, no,
I,
no.
I was going to say, like, people looked at the movie The Social Network of Mark Zuckerberg or
Yeah.
Steve Jobs, and then they're like, we need to have this grand,
No.
crazy idea that'll change the world. But for the most part, no, it's like, it's very, the reality is very different from the movies.
Yeah, before I became a financial advisor and entrepreneurship coach, I was an independent consultant for large companies, and I used to work as an employee as an employee of a consulting firm, and then I started my own consulting firm, and it was just me for like 3 years, and I have like two employees that still work for me. Tiny, tiny little business, but it was 100% in the same area that I worked in, and so I was able to leverage all my same network, all my same skills, and just double the amount of money that I made and be 100% more flexible. So like like entrepreneurship can be way easier than you think it is. It doesn't have to be unique and crazy. It could just be an evolution of what you currently do, but in a higher paid, more flexible way.
Totally, Brian. And Brian, can you tell me and the audience a little bit more about your company, Harriet Financial, and about what it is and the premise of how you started it?
Yeah. I mean, so it came about during that summer when I was off, when I was thinking, boy, everyone seems to love this lifestyle. Let's see if I can figure out a way to help people. So it evolved from purely financial coaching, where I would help people figure out like how to structure how much cash they have and where to invest the rest of it. And then it kind of migrated into true financial advising, which now I'm a registered investment advisor. But then I also do entrepreneurial coaching specifically for how you can take your business from running you to run your business right in a more flexible way. And so that's evolved over a couple of years. But the the best thing I could probably advise is if you want to run a business that allows you to be kind of free, is that what you're looking for is what's called a lifestyle business. And where I live out in California, a lifestyle business is perceived as a failed business because it's not scalable and not huge. But I actually look at a lifestyle business as the perfect business because it's one you can design around your lifestyle. And if you want to do that, there's, certain tricks that you can do to, and I got a whole bunch of them, but like one of the key things is that you chunk your work, which it sounds like it's not a technical term, where you take, instead of just like working with people constantly, you say, what is the thing I provide and how do I make it into a small little chunk of work? And then I can put those chunks of work in the months that I want to work. And then I don't have to put them in the months that I don't want to work. So everyone that I work with, I always do a time freedom forecast. And that is a 2 hour session that's super highly valuable, where I create the calculator scenarios for them. And we talk through like, what does time freedom look like for them? When could they get it? What kind of changes need to be made? And I can do that in 2 hours, and I can do three of them a day, and I could do them for 2 weeks, and then I'm done. But I've helped all those people in that kind of short chunk of, short bit of time, and then after that, oh, you want me to manage your investments for you, or you want to do a longer kind of entrepreneurial consult or entrepreneur coaching thing, we can do that too. But I'm always thinking, how does my work align around my life, not the other way around? That's kind of the trick, I think. You just need to flip that in. Everything it seems like I'm thinking about is flipped. It's time freedom before financial freedom, not the other way around. It's your life before your work, not the other way around. Just whatever you're thinking naturally, because conventional wisdom tells you, just flip it. That's how you do it.
No, I mean, that's awesome. And Brian, connected to this, I know your book is coming out next year, right? No, but for the sake of the audience, can you tell them a little bit more about this book and what you have in the book?
Yes,
And
it's called Time Freedom, and the subtitle is Rethink your work and your money to create a life you love now. And that subtitle is important because we've talked about the three main components. It's the life you're creating, the first part of the time freedom formula, your money, which is the savings and investing, and your work, which is the flexible work part. And really what I lay out is, it's full of personal stories and stories of others, of things that I've learned. It's writing a book is really transformative to the author because it really crystallizes for you why you believe the things that you believe. It's really, really pretty cool. But based on the kind of the storytelling and that framework of the time freedom formula, I kind of walk people through the creation of their own time freedom formula, the revision of it through things like the no budget, like we talked about. And then at the end, I have like a case study guide to using the calculator so that you can take your time freedom formula and project it out. And then we get real specific about how to think seasonally about a year in your life. That's another kind of key component to the whole book, which is what I call seasonal schedules. So how do you, if you choose to, set up your working life so that you're working in seasons and then you're off in seasons and doing, creative or restful things. And then how that can lead. It's just a very different way of living from the traditional, like all out 40 hours a week, all year long. It's actually more in line with how things used to work with agriculture and, living by the seasons. And so it's a unique throwback that's more possible now because of the way that is possible for us to work now. We don't just have to go down to the office, and some do, but many of us don't have to do that. And so we should take advantage of it.
Well, myself and like the audience would definitely be on the lookout for your book because time freedom is so relevant in today's world. Like we have to do everything we can to have a freedom in both the financial front and time because you never know what the future holds,
Yeah. Thank you.
And Brian, how can the audience connect with you and get to know more about you and your work? And if they want to have you coach them in regarding time freedom, how would they go about doing so?
The best thing that I would recommend is to go to timefreedomcalculator.com. It's free, so you can like play around with your own numbers. You don't even have to log in if you don't want. If you want to save them and do a whole bunch of scenarios, you can log in, but it's all free. And then usually what happens is sometimes people will get enamored with it, but be like, boy, I'd really love to bounce some ideas off Brian. There's a little button that you can click to schedule a time freedom forecast with me. There's also a little button to get on my book wait list. So everything's kind of right there on that time freedom calculator. So that's what I do, timefreedomcalculator.com.
That is amazing, Brian. And Brian, I'm so happy and grateful that you took the time to come on this podcast and share your knowledge about how to attain time freedom, because this is a very relevant topic.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
No, thank you. And I do hope that you come on this podcast at a later time,
All right. Thanks.
And I want to conclude this episode by letting my fellow extraordinary Americans know that, hey, look, there's an extraordinary within each and every one of us. And it's our duty to awaken it and unleash it. Until next time, bye for now. Hey, everyone. Thank you for watching Extraordinary America. If you like what you see, please do subscribe to our podcast and share it with others. Remember that the best investment that you can make in your lifetime is in your own financial education, for it is knowledge that truly sets us free. Also, remember that inflation is diluting your purchasing power, which in turn increases financial bondage. The practical thing to do is to protect the loss of your purchasing power and invest in precious metals or the right cryptocurrencies. Lastly, never forget that you are an extraordinary American. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.